Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth. Life on Side B is a ministry of Posture Shift, a missiological ministry equipping churches to enhance LGBTQ+ inclusion and care. You can learn more about their work at postureshift.com. We want to thank all of our patrons who keep the podcast going and growing through their continued giving. If you love this podcast, consider being a patron at patreon.com/lifeonsideb. And now on to the episode.
All right. Well, hello, Life on Side B family. Thanks so much for joining us again today. We are moving through this season. I'm so proud of our team. I'm here with Ashley today. It's Ashley and I. Hello. Ashley. How's the baby doing?
Great. He's getting. I was telling my mom, I was like, he just looks so big. Well, it's like one. Yes, he is a large child, but it's like he looks so much older. I don't know. He's only like almost a year and a half, and I'm like, I swear he just looks like a little kid.
Yeah. And today we are joined by Keifer. Keifer, how do you pronounce your last name? I should have asked this before we started recording. Is it Lucchi?
Lucchi, that's correct.
Okay, yeah. Lucchi. Okay, awesome. Just wanted to make sure. So Keifer Lucchi's with us. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. We are talking, today is one of our episodes that our patrons chose the topic. We gave a list of different things. You know, this season we're talking about resilience. So whereas the last episode that the patrons chose the topic of, the theme was authors, book authors. This one we were trying to think of contexts in which Side B people need to be resilient. And cross-cultural missions is the one that won.
Which I'm kind of surprised at, honestly. I don't really remember what the other two ones were, but I feel like it's such a small niche in our Side B world, even though Side B is already small in niche.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised because I feel like we do have quite a few missionaries in our community.
Well, a handful, yeah.
Yeah, at least enough, and I think some of those are our patrons, so...
I know at least one of them is.
Yeah. I'm trying to look up what the other topics we had were, because it's so hard. We wanted to get to all of these. Like, we obviously want to get to every single one of them. But then, you can only do so much in one season.
Yeah.
And
that's what we're
and that's where
trying to really be on top of this season.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and so it was the choices they had were being LGBT in cross-cultural missions, when friends go Side A, kind of like processing that, life after divorce, which is a whole thing, and then raising kids as a queer person. So all really good topics.
Which will probably come up in a later season.
I mean, we're going to get to all of them. Everyone, don't worry. We're going to get to all of them. But we are really excited to talk with you, Keifer, about missions, because Ashley and I
especially
both
me.
Yeah. Well, we've both lived overseas for working with mission organizations. So this is going to be a good conversation. And we are going to potentially have someone pop in a little bit later, surprises all around, but we're going to go ahead and start the conversation. So Keifer, just for anyone who doesn't know you, could you start by sharing with us, how you identify, share maybe a little bit about yourself, where are you serving, what are you doing, and how you've gotten to where you're at in reconciling your sexuality, gender, faith. I know we could spend probably 40 minutes having you do that. So, as much in a nutshell as you would like to share.
Yeah. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. So for me, the labels don't matter too much. Like, I'm not super concerned about, if someone's going to call me gay or call me same-sex attracted or whatever, like, it can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm choosing, I usually would use gay. But if someone calls me same-sex attracted, I'm not offended, or, it's more for me like I'm communicating an experience that I've had, less than an identity label. And same-sex attracted sounds like a disease. So I prefer not to use that.
Understandable.
And that's just been, I think that's partially because of my own background. Like I grew up in the church. I was always told,
Right.
you know, Christians are not gay. And I heard same-sex attracted used by other people when I was like not out to anyone. You know, I was like, I guess I have same-sex attraction I'm dealing with that's unresolved or something. And it felt to me like I had some incurable disease that could never go away. And so using the term gay at this point is a freedom thing for me of like, hey, like I can actually say, I've had this experience, but this experience isn't necessarily a disease that needs to be cured on this side of heaven. You know, like it's fine.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so for me, the journey was more about like being honest with myself first, because I had that whole experience of like, you can't be gay and a Christian. And I was like, well, I am a Christian. I do follow Jesus. And that is more important to me than my sexuality. So I guess I can't be gay. And so I guess I'm not. Even though that was something I was experiencing and struggling with, just not admitting it to myself. And when I finally did admit it to myself, it was because I had my first hookup when I was 15 years old. So I just had a hookup with a guy. And I was like, I guess I have to admit something's going on here. And that was a whole, you know, like a whole journey for me of then trying to reconcile, okay, I'm actually getting pretty inundated into pornography. Like things are going really badly with porn, and things are going pretty badly with hookup culture. But I really do love Jesus, and I really do want to follow him. And I'm having trouble reconciling these two sides of myself. The side that's really addicted to this, to the sexual side of this, and really still unwilling to be comfortable with myself, and the side that really does love Jesus and want to follow him, and I don't know how to move forward. And so for me, that culminated with a trip to an HIV clinic. I really thought I had contracted HIV after an encounter. And thankfully had not. But that to me was like the point where I was like, I need help. Like I had to go to I went to counseling. I came forward to 3 different leaders who I was working for, who were all Christians. I was an assistant youth pastor at the time, also doing ministry through theater, discipleship through theater, and in a writing program for young writers. And all 3 of those leaders were just like, hey, like this isn't a big deal. You came to us. Like we're not actually upset with you. Like Jesus loves you. Like let's help you through the addiction side of this, but no one's going to fire you. No one's going to there's no issue here. And I was able to keep all 3 jobs.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like that's absolutely incredible. I have been incredibly lucky in my interactions with the church for the most part. Very, very blessed and fortunate. So I went forward to them and like 7 of my peers. Like I chose people from different categories of my life. Like I didn't want to leave any area of my life without someone who knew what was going on. When I went forward to those 7 other friends, who all were really supportive. Like I didn't actually have any bad blowback from those 7 friends. One of those 7 people I went forward to is actually the person who's now my wife. So I am married. I have two kids. My wife is the only woman I've ever been attracted to, so I definitely don't use bisexual. I still use gay. It's just it's like the majority of my experience has been being attracted to men, minus this one person.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it makes sense otherwise.
I mean, I get it. I normally say that I'm a Kinsey 5.998 because Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, is the only one. She's the only one.
Amen.
Fantastic.
Ooh. Yes.
Like Ashley's looking at me like, oh God.
That is awesome. So I mentioned at the beginning that like labels aren't as important to me. Like I will use same-sex attracted. It depends on who I'm communicating to. And honestly, if I'm making a decision, I'm more like, if I'm going to offend someone, I'm going to offend a Christian over offending someone who's not. And so if I'm in a conversation with Christians and also non-believers, I'm just going to use gay. And
Okay, yeah.
it's going to have to just be, okay with the Christian people there. That said, missionary has been a much more dangerous label for me than gay ever has, as far as an identity thing. Like that took me some time to work through. Whereas for me, it was not like ever a part of me that was like, this is going to override my relationship with Jesus to say I'm gay. It was just like, okay, like this describes my experience really well.
Yeah.
But missionary, I had to do a lot of work to be like, oh, this isn't, like my walk with Jesus is now defined by missionary, and that's not healthy.
Like not
That's not
allowing
okay.
that to just like encompass your whole entire faith walk. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Like I had a period of time where I was on the States for when I got married, I had to be in the States for 6 months on home assignment as part of the previous organization we were part of. That was their rule. And I recall at one point just being like, I'm a missionary in the Czech Republic, but I'm not there, and this is horrible, and this is hard, and I don't really know what to do with this, and the Lord just really speaking clearly to me in a conversation I was having with someone, and just being like, you're a missionary wherever I send you. Like, missionary just means sent out one. You've been sent out. You're here right now. Your job is the same as any other Christian, and that's just follow me. And so it's not special to be a missionary.
Wow.
Like, just follow me. Normally you're overseas, but right now you're here. That's fine. And so putting like the work behind and the baggage behind and just being like, I don't have to meet a quota. I don't have to do all these things. Like I'm not defined by this, like my work, like by my work or by how I'm following Jesus. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No. And I love that and I think that's so important because, kind of when we get into these identity conversations, it'll be like, your identity is in Christ, all that kind of stuff that people point to us. But then we make allowances and we don't make a big deal when how many times we can envelop our identity in missionary or pastor or whatever it might be.
Ministry
or even
positions,
little things.
Yeah.
I even had a moment where I realized my identity had become too much a coffee drinker or a coffee person, like where I cared so much about like really, really good coffee. That when I felt like God was saying, stop drinking so much coffee, it's actually affecting your health, I was like, I don't want to. And that moment was like, oh, even when God is the one pointing out to me, this is probably not healthy for me personally, like I still am really resistant to that. That's probably an identity issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a barista, I feel very called out right now.
I'm also currently working as a barista at a youth club, and it's horrible because I'm working there like 2 or 3 days a week, and I'm like, I can drink coffee once a week right now.
Yes.
So I get to serve it all day, but not drink it.
And I'd love to take this moment to say hi, Jesse. Thanks for joining us.
Hello,
So glad
Josh.
so glad you're here. For everyone, normally we always try to have guests, everyone together from the beginning of the episode. I did a little bit of telling people the wrong times. So thanks so much for still joining us, Jesse. We appreciate you hopping in and joining us for this conversation.
Time zones.
Yeah, those dang time zones.
Just the worst.
Yeah, this is going to be a great conversation. Before I keep going, Keifer, was there anything else you wanted to share about your journey or anything there? I just didn't want to cut in with that.
No, I think that's a good summary without going into too many details.
Too much. Yeah, no.
Right.
I appreciate you giving that because that's so good. Like what I really love about this conversation that we're having here is, Ashley and I were in missions. I mean, Ashley, you're still planning to go back overseas. So
Yes, actually, me and my husband were talking about that. It's like we're aiming for before the child starts kindergarten, be out of here.
Yes. So we've both been in overseas missions. She's planning to go back. That part of my life is done. Keifer, you're still in it. And Jesse, you're planning to go into it. So we have everyone from different
Every
stage. And I love that because I think it just shows people in all this different stuff. So before we get into more of this conversation, Jesse, could you introduce yourself a little bit? How do you identify? Where you're at, those kinds of things.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jesse White. I currently identify as queer, and I've been processing gender dysphoria recently, playing around potentially in certain spaces using non-binary as well. And my process of getting to where I am now, of reconciling faith and sexuality, started when I was very young. So my faith journey began when I was 6. That's when I started following Jesus. A lot of that came out of my parents, who have a very strong faith, and faith lineage on both sides from my grandparents as well. Just being very intentional about speaking the truth of Scripture to me and my siblings from a very young age, and making sure that we had a good understanding of it, not just with their words, but also with how they lived out their lives. And I remember when I was 6, making a profession of faith, and I didn't have a full understanding of what that meant for me at that point, but I knew that I didn't want anything else besides following Jesus. And so fast forward to when I was 12, there's a lot of things that happened during my 12th year of life. One of those things was processing my sexuality, of being attracted to men, and also dealing with some gender dysphoria that I pushed away until very recently. Um, that was a really hard year for me. I didn't know what to do with all that. During that same year, my dad was also on a deployment overseas to Afghanistan. And so I basically took on the mindset of, I'm a Christian. Christians don't deal with these things. And so this must not be something that is going to last. And so I just chose to shove it down and ignore it. There was a lot of stuff connected with being a military kid, being the oldest child, growing up in the church, being a pastor's kid. Just kind of all played into that process for me. And so I just basically shoved all of my stuff down so that I wouldn't have to deal with it. I also was in a space where I didn't have anyone I could go to with a lot of these questions and feelings I was experiencing. And so I just tried to deal with it on my own. Basically, for the rest of my teen years, getting up into college, I felt like I was stuck on an island in the middle of a hurricane. There was a lot of turmoil happening in my personal life and my family's life, and I really didn't have anything to keep me grounded except for my faith. That was the only thing I knew for certain, is that I was a follower of Jesus and that I was saved, but I didn't have anything else to go off of. When I got to college, I was at a point where I was fed up with feeling controlled by my fears of what was happening internally for me. I was so terrified of these feelings I was having, these thoughts I was experiencing. I was constantly on edge. And so finally I got to a point where I got to college and realized this isn't going away. So I need to do something about it, because doing anything at this point is better than not. And I spent the next 2 to 3 years, from 2016 to 2019, really intentionally working through a lot of questions of faith and sexuality with some really, really good friends and community that the Lord placed in my life. I definitely would not have been able to get to the point that I'm at now if it weren't for those friends and community, including some really influential side B people that I encountered very early on in that journey. That was really crucial in getting me to the point where I'm at now. And currently, I feel a really strong desire to, while I'm still in the States, do ministry specifically oriented to queer individuals in the church, and then also outreach to the LGBTQ community in my local area of Raleigh.
And what would you say, if you would be willing to share, like, what could you share with us a little bit about what your plans are with missions wise? Like, what are you thinking of
Yeah.
going into, or those things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so since I was 8, I felt a very strong calling to go to Southeast Asia. that has been one of the few things that has never changed over my over that almost 20-year time span. So it was initially focused on China. As I was getting into my undergraduate and starting to kind of flesh that out a little bit more, I slowly felt the Lord opening my heart to just the whole of East Asia. I am fascinated with the culture, the language. I love the food. Like, Asian cuisine is my favorite. Love the people too. Like, some of my favorite people I interact with on a regular basis are my friends from any part of Asia. And then I think on the spiritual side of things, I've always been really intrigued at like the different like religions there. And then also I've been very burdened, especially with the persecution that happens in a lot of Southeast Asian contexts. So more recently, that has shifted from China to being more focused on either Thailand or Cambodia. That's where my organization that I'm working with right now has been kind of like shifting my focus a little bit more. But not really sure. That's still a ways out for me personally. So I still got a good like 5 to 7 years before I'm probably getting to that point of actually going.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. And Ashley, I hadn't even told you, I didn't think I told you this before. I'd also told Jesse, as we kind of get into this conversation, I had told Jesse, hey, if you have any questions as someone going into missions that you have for people going into missions, feel free to share them. So as we go on, Jesse, if there's things as we talk that relate to something that you're interested in all of this, please share that as someone who's kind of going into it. But
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess the first point that I'd just love for us all to talk about is how do you feel the organization or organizations you have worked with have handled supporting you as a missionary who is LGBT and side B? Like, what has been everyone's experiences with that? Keifer, would you be up for starting?
Sure. So I've been part of 2 different missions organizations. We switched from the first one post-marriage because we just needed better like pastoral care support. We actually were the organization we switched to is the one I'll talk about. It makes more sense to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's called All Nations out of Kansas City.
Okay.
And we switched to them partially because we were already doing what they were doing. And I'd heard them speak at several conferences. And they were actually, one of their speakers is one of the people who said, who spoke, she spoke at a conference that I was at when I was a youth pastor. And she was the one who made me think, wow, if missions were like this, I could actually be a missionary. And I'd always wanted to, but never thought it was accessible for me. So it made sense to be there.
Yeah.
When we joined up, because we were in a unique position of we just gotten married, I had actually just started using the word gay to describe myself after marriage. Until then, I was just unsure. I was still trying to figure things out. I remember post-marriage going to my wife one day and being like, if I start calling myself gay, would that be a problem for you? And she's like, would it change anything? And she's like, no, that's fine. I don't really care. Whatever's fine.
That's cool.
Yeah. She's honestly like biggest supporter and yeah, amazing. So
I just want to say props to her, and I love that because a lot of times a lot of marriages that I hear where it's the husband is gay, it really is a really big problem for the wife.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of terrible stories, not as a discouragement. I'm just saying, just huge props to your wife to be so supportive in that, in something that I know that for a lot of women is very scary.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that helped in her case was just like we'd already like talked through everything ahead. Like I said before, she was one of the 7 people I actually came out to immediately.
Yeah.
And she had already been referring to me as gay in her head before. So for her it was like
Sure.
Yeah, no. So when we joined All Nations, I had just come to the point where I was like, this is a word. I don't know where I'm going to be with this. I'm kind of testing this out, using this about myself. So far, I feel much more comfortable. I feel much more free, not using same-sex attracted.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to the leadership in All Nations, and I want to make sure before I join them that they are okay if I end up making this the word I use, if they end up making this be, because we'd both talked about, my wife and I, how at some point I was going to be doing ministry with LGBT people specifically. And that was actually, I wanted to share my story. My wife wanted me to share my story. Before we got married, she said, I will never be ashamed of you for what, like your sexuality, where you've been, but I will be ashamed of you if you don't share your story someday. Because that is your testimony. That is your walk with Jesus, and people should hear it.
Props.
So,
I already love your wife. I've never met her.
Okay.
She's always been a couple steps ahead of where I'm comfortable going in that regard, which is great. And so when I joined All Nations, I didn't think I'd be sharing anything publicly. I was like, maybe, like we're going to have kids at some point. We're just married. Maybe in 10 years, we'll share something. And it was like 2 years later. So I went to the leaders and I contacted my direct boss and like my direct leaders, and then the leader of the organization as a whole. And I was like, I want to make sure, I had a Skype call or a Zoom call, I guess, with each of them. I was just like, I want to make sure, we're good. Like I used what at the time I was like, this is the worst possible language I could use. I want to use whatever the thing that could be the farthest I'd probably describe myself as. So I was like, I am a gay Christian. I consider myself a gay Christian. I am married, but I'm like, there's definitely no, like right now, like I still consider myself gay, that's not probably going to change. I want to make sure you guys are on board with this before I join up, because I don't want this to be a problem down
That
the
just
road.
sounds terrifying, if I'm being completely honest.
It absolutely was, because I did not know these people that well. And I really liked this organization and really wanted to join them.
Right.
We were already partway through the process and everything. So they looked at me, both of them, in separate conversations, and they were like, we are so happy you told us this. We are so glad you're part of All Nations, and we're so glad you're gay. And I was just like, okay, like that is incredible and not what I expected.
Yeah.
The only question I got asked was, do you have a support structure for yourself? Or do you want us to help you find a support structure? Because we'll help you find one if you don't have one. And I had one. So, it's like, no, I have people I can be accountable to who can check up on me. Like, that's important to me. And later on, like 2 years later, when I wanted to come out publicly, I actually emailed my boss first and was like, okay, I feel like God's leading me to this now. Can I do this? Because I think I want to work. I've already been, we have a group in Europe called Epic that works with Side B guys.
Yeah.
It's actually transitioning into a leadership group now. So like
cool.
Guys who want to lead in the church by sharing their stories and getting involved in churches. And
is it a specifically men's group? I've heard of Epic, but
it historically has been specifically men. We are actually probably opening to women also who are Side B and Y and want to lead, because we can now that it's leadership based and not support based.
Yeah.
So yeah, like when I told them, I've already been leading this for a year, just like quietly, because it's not something that's been, I've been out about, but I want to be out about it. And their response was, great. Say what you want to say. We know there could be blowback. We're willing to accept whatever blowback happens because you're valuable to us. And we don't care if we lose donors. We don't care if we lose support. We don't care if it hurts us. We want you to be as open as you feel the Lord is calling you to be.
Yeah.
So that was incredible. And I personally did not lose any supporters over that issue. I actually gained 2 supporters over that issue, which was crazy. Yeah. I had a really, really positive experience, and I know that's not always the norm.
I'm loving this for you.
It's also inspiring because, like,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ashley.
No, I'm just saying, I'm like,
yeah.
Love to hear that. It is inspiring, gives hope.
Because, I mean, like, obviously we have to hear the reality of what happens to some people in organizations, and it's grueling. But then it's also good to hear, hey, that's not all of the occasions. That's not always what happens.
And there's definitely been some negative stuff. Like when I first came to, like there have been people I've opened up to who have had the reaction more of like, oh, well, then definitely don't talk to my kids anymore,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Just, awful reactions. But
Yeah.
in this case, it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Yeah,
really impressed with
that's
All
great.
Nations. And
I love that.
yeah.
Ashley, what's been did you open up with your organization? I can't remember.
Yes. I remember, like, I worked with Youth with a Mission. I know they mentioned that before, in South America for years in 2 different countries. So in the first one I was kind of like Keifer said, he started using gay like right after he got married. I was like in the whole like process of figuring myself out in the time of my engagement and getting married, and it just kind of confirms a few things for you. So I remember just finally coming to that realization in itself, like the denial. I couldn't do that anymore. It just finally came to this point of like having to recognize it to an extent. And so I remember with the leader I was working with then, I said I, used to be same-sex attracted or whatever, because like that was the way that I felt at that point. That was something from like when I was younger and this, that, and the other thing. And it was just the part of the process, I guess, I had to go through. And I told her, like, my director, and I was like, kind of like going like confess or something. And I was like, and I didn't know what she was going to say. And I felt like, I was like, do you still trust me? Like, I think that was always like my big question. And she's like, well, of course. She's like, because that's the way, she said, she's like, that's not who you are now. She's like, I know you right now in the place that you are, and the person that I've gotten to know is a trustworthy person. So she's like, I've got no problem, whatever you think, like, whatever your past may be. She's like, it doesn't really matter to me. And that's also, it's like, one, it's in part of how I personally presented it. But for me, that was a good thing for me. When we moved, after we got married, we went to a different country to do our School of Biblical Studies. And I remember I was there for a little while, and I was like, I feel like I need to share this, with whoever usually is my like personal like mentor in that place or whatever. I usually want to share that. And I think it was, and at that point a few years had gone by, like no, it had been like maybe a year. So
Oh, how time flies.
like a little over a year probably. And I was same thing. I was like, I used to be attracted to women, this, that, and the other thing. And as like time went on in that place, I was like, I'm really having to come to terms with like, this is just part of, and that time I think I put it part of my past. And they kind of like kept a close eye on me and shit like that. That was not the most fun. But that was the place where I did a lot of the soul searching that I did, with the tools of learning how to study the Bible and things where I was. But those people loved me where I was, even though they didn't know how to do that necessarily well. They did the best with what they had. And we had a, like, what you would call like a resident ex-gay. He was someone he was part of the organization. He taught a lot of the material in our base. So that's all they had. Like, they didn't have anything else. And so I read a lot of those books. That was my experience with that, really. And I was just coming to be what I consider side B, like, within a year of having left. Like, the year I was in the process of coming back to the States was, like, the year that I was like, maybe this ex-gay thing isn't it, and really finding side B and accepting that for myself. So that was a whole process with the little bit that I did share.
Yeah. Wow. I wish I just would love to work for a missions organization and just be known as the resident gay.
Oh, he wasn't.
Oh, I know.
It was very much.
You said it was ex-gay. Of course, I don't want to be known as that. I just want to be known as. I think of like
The resident
Rachel
gay,
Gilson for Crew. That's just
right. Yeah,
I don't
that would
think
be
that's her
awesome.
title, but I just.
I'm pretty sure that's how people like think of her. Yeah, most definitely.
Rachel, we love you.
But like, I remember he was a hairdresser. Like, and I remember, and everybody was like, the hands, and I was like. Me, just at the time, I was like, you just can't judge people like that. I'm like, I don't know. And at that point, I didn't know a lot of his story, so I was like, you can't say that about people. And then it's like all this other stuff. It's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was Colombian.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Yeah. Jesse, have you shared with your organization, like, in short, like, what has been your experience?
Yeah, so that has been not as great process on the front end, at least.
Right.
So for those of you who don't know, I live deep in the Southern Baptist territory.
Bless you.
I think I live deeper than you, man. Don't worry.
I don't know. I go to Southern Baptist Seminary, so you can't get much deeper than that.
I'm
Although
not
you're
saying
probably not far
Baptist.
from one
I'm
either.
just definitely very in the southern part of the United States.
Oh yes. There's a lot of crossover. So I attended Southern Baptist Seminary. It has been great overall.
Well, that's good.
But I knew within my first year I did not want to go to the IMB, the International Mission Board. And that wasn't even related to Side B stuff or like any of that. It was exclusively because I saw from some very good friends of mine, if you didn't fit into their very specific box that they want, then they would make it really difficult for you to go.
Yeah.
If not impossible for you to go. Later on, one of my best friends, she actually just came back to the States from Uganda. She has experienced a lot of spiritual abuse from team leader. A good friend of mine who was at the time Side B and serving with the IMB in Italy, he actually got kicked out of his position. Honestly, like in my opinion, for some illegitimate reasons, and they did not do a good job handling that situation at all.
Yeah.
It was very poorly handled. And honestly, pretty abusive and manipulative from my perspective as well. So I knew pretty much right away. I was like, I'm not going to go with IMB. But I didn't know of any other organizations at the time. So I was like, God, if this is what you want me to do, like I need you to show me something else. One of my missions classes talked about a lot of different organizations. Two that stuck out to me were OMF, which is my organization, Overseas Missionary Fellowship, and Crossworld. I contacted both of them, had really good conversations with both initially, but OMF, they have a greater focus in Southeast Asia, which is where I went to land, and with diaspora around the world as well. So I went with them. I was originally going to go on a 6-month mission trip for the final part of my degree, and that was supposed to happen in 2020. Obviously, that did not happen because 2020. Yeah. But leading up to that, at the training conference, I actually shared with one of the guys who would have been kind of like in charge of my group that would have been going, and then he brought in a couple other people. We had a brief conversation, went very well overall. Honestly, one of the things that I've been most impressed with from my organization is with that knowledge, like they didn't make a big deal about it. And a big thing that they talked about, similar to what you said, Keifer, is they asked, do you have a good support system? Do you have people that you're in community with? There's actually a period where I was going through like a really rough time connected more directly to my sexuality, that was brought forth via one of their other missionaries who is definitely ex-gay. I was supposed to be working with him. He asked me some
uncomfortable questions.
Irrelevant, uncomfortable questions that didn't really have anything to do with what I was wanting to do with him, and like his ministry. But he was insistent on knowing all these like really personal things about me that for the most part didn't even apply. But as soon as he found the one thing that he was looking for that confirmed whatever he had thoughts about in regards to me being Side B, he was like, that's it. He's out. He can't work with me. And I was frustrated, but it did lead to like some good like for me, personal conviction and confessing of sins that I was working through. And when I talked to my leaders about it in the organization, which I expected them to react kind of similarly to the way that he did, they actually were very gracious, and they were like, listen, we still want you to work with us. Like, obviously this is going to have impacts on your upcoming trip, but we still want you to, like, we still want to send you. We want to make sure that you are like seeking like good community and seeking to grow in your relationship with the Lord, like, because that was what mattered the most to them. They didn't really care about stuff related to my sexuality. They cared about my connection to God, because that's what's going to have a bigger impact on the field.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that is really good.
So
Yeah.
and it's been really nice after that point. I've made several connections with some local missionaries in Cambodia, actually, and have had phenomenal conversations with one guy in particular, who has been like very encouraging and supporting. He's all about like the ministry that I want to do, because part of what I want to do is have better conversations in Southeast Asia around sexuality, which is going to be something. But he has been like very encouraging there, and I think especially having that connection within the organization, like that'll be very helpful as I'm moving forward and getting closer to the point of going overseas.
Well, and you know what I love about everyone's different experiences is like, one thing I love about what you're doing right now, Jesse, is being able to have these conversations like pre-departure in many ways, because I feel like I run into a lot of queer missionaries who like when we're figuring this out on the field, like that's why I'm so happy about like Keifer, like your whole situation and how great that like was as approaching your organization, because I hear of so many times as people figure it out on the field or like opening up on the field, it can go all Ashley as well, like all of this stuff, like we all know how this all goes. And so being able to do that beforehand and being able to say, okay, like this is where I'm going to go and like how am I going to do that? Because I think that there's a whole nother thing, which we can get more into this about, like when you are side B and queer, the importance of community is really important, and trying to figure out what that looks like. So then you have the whole aspect of like, what is my community going to look like? Like I'm very thankful in my organization that they knew about my sexuality going in just because of my history and my testimony. I didn't talk about it a lot at the beginning. As I went, I started talking about it more. The funny part is I got a lot of flack in my organization. Even if I used same-sex attracted, like if I mentioned that I still was attracted to men, pastors wanted me fired. I'm very thankful that my board was very strongly in favor of me. So they were like, yeah, no, he's not. But if it hadn't been for them, I probably would have lost my job way early on.
Wow.
Yeah, but I guess kind of shifting into this, especially with that whole part of what I was saying with, you know, when we're queer, when we're side B, whether married or single, the whole other aspect we have to navigate is the culture of the country you're in. Which is very different depending on context. I mean, Keifer,
where you are.
Keifer, you're in Europe. Like Ashley and I were in Latin America. Jesse, you're planning to go to East Asia. Like, so all of these are very different. Would love to hear everyone's thoughts on navigating that. Both, I guess, like navigating. Keifer, you said you do some ministry work in this area, like toward. For LGBT people, which I know that's one thing, but then also how do you navigate it for your own experience being in the culture?
So in some ways I'm fortunate being in Czech, in that Czech is kind of considered among the central and Eastern European countries, it's considered like the most open, basically. So people from Slovakia, Hungary, probably not Austria, but Slovakia, Hungary, and Poland often come to Czech because they don't feel as accepted where they are. So as far as Czech goes, it's very like there's still within the church, there's a lot of ex-gay stuff still there. Like it was basically what happened was when XK failed in America, it moved over here. And so if you go to Hungary, Slovakia, countries farther that are actually more east, they have a lot of XK stuff still. Czech, because I think partially because this is Czech's considered right now the most atheistic country in the world. So partially because of that, because we have such a low percentage of Christians, it's not as big of a deal, but it's still, you know, a problem within the church. On the other side, there are some people in this country. I have a friend, Marek, here, and some other people who have just been really good pillars and forerunners of like, hey, like this is what it's like to live your life as a celibate gay Christian.
I love Marek. I've not really gotten to interact with him, but I love him. He's really cool.
He's great. He's fantastic. And so he's been around long enough that we've actually had some conversations recently. There are teenagers now, because of Marek, who are not feeling like they have to like come out and then find a safe community. They're like, I want to come out and then I want to find people in my church I can be safe with. Because they know it should be how the church works.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. Like that witness being there in the culture. The issue that I have is with my own. I'm sometimes willing to go farther than some other people would in reaching people. That's always been something that I've known about myself with missions. Like we talk about in missions training, like contextualization. I'm willing to go pretty far on the contextualization scale. Like, here's how far I can talk about, like, change what it, like, talk about Jesus in a way that is highly contextualized to your culture. I can go almost all the way to the far extreme on that.
Yes, I am living for this. Oh my god.
So working with LGBT people, I'm like I was actually, my wife and I were shopping for rainbow stuff yesterday. Because I'm planning to go to Pride this year for the first time in Prague. Because I'm like, I actually need to meet people and talk to them. And that's not going to happen if I'm not where they are. And I know that they're going to all be together during Pride. So I've been looking at things like, I'm like, I want a shirt that is like subtle, you know, has a rainbow somewhere, but is subtle, that I could even like wear to church and have it not be a big deal. Because I want to start conversations at church. I want to have another shirt that is like, this is very obviously less subtle, like way less subtle, you know, like, and maybe like a pin or something, you know, like depending on the situation, I want to be able to start conversations.
Get the outfits done now. It's 2 weeks away. Pride is coming up. Well, when we're recording this, it's 2 weeks away. I can't remember when we're. Anyway, continue.
It doesn't happen until August in Prague, so I have 3 more months.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's like Atlanta. I think Atlanta also, like in Georgia.
There's late,
So anyway, that to me, that's so I'm working with a church here. We also plant house churches, but we work with a church. And in the past, I've always been like, what is the balance? You know, of like, I don't want to needlessly offend people, but I do want to start conversations.
Yeah.
But I also do want to reach out to the LGBT community in a way that is like totally going out there, totally trying to meet people, making friends, you know, not just like, oh yes, I am a good Christian. But also I'll talk to you. You know, I don't want that to be the approach, you know? Like, no, like actually I'm also, like, I'm a gay Christian. Like I actually want to go talk to you as one of you.
It reminds me, I don't know if you know Kevin Brown, but we adore Kevin Brown. He's in New Zealand, and he'll just like have these get-ups of rainbow. But then
just like completely.
But then he has a whole entire thing that he says whenever someone asks him about any of his rainbow crosses or anything like that, to make it a conversation starter. So just obviously, I don't imagine you being completely covered in rainbow and glitter. Not that Kevin is either, but still.
Well, yeah, no, like his normal, I think like what he will consistently wear is his little, like he has like a rainbow cross, and it's like a subtle rainbow cross. Really, it's not really like, you know, stripes. His ichthus is a little more bold, but it's also smaller. He wears that normally, but whenever he comes to the Side B retreats, or when he comes to Revoice, it's the socks, it's the shoestrings, it's everything.
Anyway, but then he's sat down with me and showed me when someone asks, "Hey, why do you have this?" Then he has a whole thing he goes into it. But anyway,
That is exactly what my plan is. Like we've been talking through, like if I get this shirt, I could start a conversation that goes this direction. If I have this shirt, like this is like that kind of a thing. But
love it.
Anyway, I do feel like the more conservative Christian culture and trying to find the middle is the hard part for me. Of like I still want to be loving that culture, loving the church culture here, but I also want to love LGBT people well.
Yeah.
So
I read something recently that said that if you are unwilling to offend people, then you're not fit for ministry. But also, if you're eager to offend people, you're also not fit for ministry.
Ooh, yes.
It's like finding
That's
that
good.
balance.
Yes. Oh.
Yes, because both
Yeah.
Twitter's good
Love
for
it.
some things.
God show us. God show us. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Like, I went to, for instance, when I lived in Colombia, it was like a very mixed bag because you have Bogota, which is like, I mean, I think it's one of the largest gay communities in the world, technically.
Wow.
I think like we actually plan on moving to Colombia as well, like in a few years, and like that's kind of like I've been trying to get a feel for what it's like there, and it's like basically I just want to get the like it depends.
It just depends. Because it's this weird thing of I've learned that Colombia is one of the countries with the most amount of laws protecting LGBT people in the world, but
which is also recent. In a
it's
sense.
within like the last 5 years. But then what makes that interesting is the amount of crime against LGBT people shows that the enforcement of those laws is very low. So there's a high presence of laws, but they're not enforced very highly. Part of that's just because of how hard it is for the country to there's a lot of land. Like I think 80% of the population lives in about 30% of the land kind of thing.
Oh my.
So there's a lot of areas where you can't really have that. So I lived in the coffee region, which was not necessarily bad, but I also had to watch things. So it is also interesting with that. Like I went to a Pride event in Armenia, and it was so small. It was so small. It was the first one they'd ever done. So I didn't get a lot of opportunities with that. But I always had to be very careful simply in my city in that. Yeah. I don't know. Ashley, what was your kind of experience in Latin America?
Like I said, we were in a couple of places. I know that in the first country we were in, which is also coincidentally where my husband's from, it was in the time that I was kind of dealing with things. We had went home, we were visiting my in-laws, and we were at his church or something. I was like, hey, where's so-and-so? Because he I wouldn't say we were super close, but he was a friend of ours, and it was someone that I always saw and that I enjoyed the company. Oh, you guys don't know? And I'm like, no, what? And they were like, and I think it was the way they said it was se declaró. I was like, what you mean?
Yeah.
And which meant he declared himself, and I was like, never heard that term. I was like, and I think but I for some reason knew what he meant, but just because of the hush hush way he said it, I was like, he came out, and they're kind of by accident, but yes. And it was oh, okay, which was it's looking back, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, but it was received not well, and poor innocent dumb me, I gave his mother a copy of one of Nicolosi's books.
Oh,
God forgive me. But I was trying to give her hope to be this is not, your son is not lost on God, which was her whole thing. She was very, upset and distraught about it. It was always just kind of hush hush talked about in a sense. And then, like I said, the second country we were in, we had our, our resident ex-gay, and he was very wanting to reach the community in his own way. And I know he went to, not to Colombia, I think Brazil.
Okay.
And he did some missions, and he did a lot of his talks, and he would get he was on the radio, and he would get rioted out by the local gay community and being not happy with his presence. And,
which is another weird country. Brazil's another weird country where there's a high level of laws protecting LGBTQ people, but it's one of the most dangerous countries to be queer. I don't know. Anyway, sorry.
Brazil's very at the very least, because we also have Brazil has a very rising like little side B community
Yeah.
online at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're there, but it's so they have a little more knowledge,
Yeah.
I guess you would say, but it's still the church is still very conservative
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And I feel like Latin America as a whole is kind of like that. They feel the church in and of itself feels pressured, kind of like the same way they do here in the States. They're like they're out to get us or whatever. In a way, but almost pressured like this is this Western thing that y'all trying to put on us and our children and all this. So it's not only just like the gays are out to get us, it's like the Westerns are trying to like brainwash us or something. So that's a whole other thing. But yeah, it was just very this hush hush thing. It wasn't, I never felt that it was like necessarily that I was personally judged for it by the people who loved me and knew me, but it was also something we don't talk about publicly.
Yeah. I feel like
It's not something we're going to talk about.
I feel like there's this general wave of what I hear, and everyone, you can correct me if I'm wrong, like that. I mean, Latin America, I do think many times people think it is this oppressive place for queer people when it's not necessarily. It just depends on where you go. It's actually, there's actually a lot of acceptance of queer people in a lot of regions of Latin America. With Europe, it's been interesting for me as I've met more people in Europe, both European queer people as well as missionaries, that there is more of a culture than a lot of people would think of. And Keifer, I don't know what word you would use, like in different regions of Europe where it's either just hush hush or not talked about, or would you say that that's correct?
Yeah, I'd say either hush hush or like just extremes in the country. Like
Yeah.
with Czech, it's like there's a certain demographic that it should be not talked about. There's a certain demographics with older people where they're just like, no. And then, then there's also an incredibly accepting, incredibly accepting side. Like Czech is still one of the most open countries on this side of Europe, at least,
Would you say that's a little...
And it's kind of like in Latin America, it's like the country itself sometimes can be, like you said, very accepting. Like I said, we have the examples of Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. They're in general kind of very liberal countries to an extent. But at the same time, the churches in those places are just tend to be a little more closed-minded or at the very least ignorant about a lot of these things.
It's definitely getting better with the churches here, but
That's cool.
There's still a lot of...
That's great.
Yeah,
and I feel like a lot of it, there's also an urban versus rural disconnect as well, as well as I think a lot of what, at least in my experience with some different countries, a lot of what pushes the rights of LGBTQ people is actually UN initiatives, things that they want to be on the global stage, so they have to have these laws, even though the country is maybe not ready culturally for it.
That's the whole thing that I was saying about them whole being like the Western world is trying to put their ideology on us. Is that because of the whole UN push for things? Yeah.
And so it gets hard because we queer people get caught in the middle of it because we're like, yay, we want these laws, but I don't want to deal with the pushback from the people around. Well, Keifer, you also said that you're planning in the future to go to Asia, and obviously Jesse, you're planning to go to Asia. What do you guys know about the context within that, or Jesse, what have you planned for in that? I know you talked about that you've connected with some people over there, but kind of preparing to be in that context.
Keifer, do you want to start?
No, you start, definitely. I think you've probably done more research than I have.
Okay. I have been studying, researching, looking up on this for years and years at this point. And it's super interesting because Asia as a whole has a majority of the world's populace, specifically within China and India. That encompasses a third, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think it encompasses a third of the world's populace just in those two nations. Wow. So it's both are huge, have huge cities with packed crowds of people. But one of the big things in Asia in particular is there's not a ton of development when it comes to technological and other types of even medical advancements. There's a lot more I guess when it comes to where a lot of Western nations are at, they're much further behind. Um, so that's one aspect. Another aspect for me that I've been having to think about more and more is outside of a select few countries in Asia, a lot of the nations, especially where I'm looking to go, so like Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, because of all the wars that have happened in not so recent history, or sorry, in recent history. I
Yeah.
don't know why I said it the way I
No,
did.
you're good.
But all the wars that have happened in recent history in those regions have completely torn the countries to shreds and have resulted in a lack of ability to do any sort of those advancements. So there's several areas in that region where the land is like unusable pretty much because of all of the bombs and the gas and the toxins that are in the environment. Like it's unusable for a lot of people to live there. It's also resulted in a lot of generational trauma because of the wars that have happened, a lot of resettlement from places where people used to live and grow and have thriving communities, and now they can never go back. So there's an aspect too where I've had to figure out, for me personally, especially if I'm going to be landing in that region of like Cambodia or Thailand, how important is this particular conversation going to be? Because
I feel that.
it's it's something that should be talked about and needs to be talked about, but also like a lot of these people are just trying to even survive and not starve to death. Um, and so the like in the grand scheme of things, like this particular conversation is not always going to be a primary focus and probably doesn't need to be a primary focus depending on where I'm at. And again, that kind of gets into contextualization. If I'm in a bigger city or interacting with people from bigger cities, that may be something that comes up, but that's not always going to be a primary focus. And then I would say the biggest thing that I've been having a really hard time trying to figure out the way I'm going to engage it is like it is hush hush to the extreme. Anything because of how a lot of the cultural and worldview perspectives are within Asia, anything that would bring shame on your family, your community, maybe even your city, depending on your status level, you don't talk about. You don't bring it up. You don't address it. People may know that's going on, but it's not going to be addressed because once it's addressed, you have to actually do something about it, and that means you're depending on what it is, you are going to be seen as shameful and dirty and not worthy of being part of this community, and then your community is going to do whatever they can to snuff that out, to kick you out, to get you out of the way, so that way they can preserve their honor, their face. So it's really hard to know how to engage conversations like this, and even with other stuff like mental health or abuse issues, which are also things I'm very passionate about. Like, it's hard enough to have some of those conversations like in American churches, so having to like figure out how to do that in parts of Asia is going to be very tricky. The one of the missionaries I was going to be working with, the one that asked me all the very uncomfortable questions, he's running, or at the time at least, I don't know what's going on with him right now, but at the time he was running I guess it was a pseudo ex-gay ministry in China, and it was very, very like word of mouth, quiet, like didn't really get publicized in any way, partially because it was also a Christian thing, so there was that level of security, but also because like a lot of these people who were coming were trying to figure out like what to do about this because they didn't want their families finding out or their communities finding out and losing like jobs, ability to get homes, even other like financial or just general living situations. Like, it has much broader impacts on all aspects of life than I think it does in a lot of other parts of the world.
Definitely.
And that makes it really tricky. Like, it's more walking on eggshells than I think people anticipate.
Well, and I also think that East Asia, correct me if I'm wrong, like this is where I think when we're queer in cross-cultural missions, the conversation of colonialism becomes very extreme.
Yes.
Because I feel like whereas, I mean, in Keifer, I guess it's like less in Europe, right? I mean, more of
it's
like
a little bit less.
more like a Europe American perspective being pushed on a European perspective or something like that.
But even Europeans wouldn't look at me and say, "Oh, you're just trying to colonize us." Like, in general, they're like, we actually colonized you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I was about to say, like, I was around that
so
it's the other way around.
Not with Europe, but I especially feel like with Africa, Latin America, because whereas like with Latin America, it's this, the LGBT conversation is being pushed on us from North America. I feel like with East Asia, from what I've heard from people, there's almost a revival of pre-colonial culture, which did allow for spectrums outside of gender binary, did allow for ways of culture like outside of like opposite sex relationships in some way, like different things. I know that I mean, in a sense, like indigenous North American communities with two-spirit, identities and these kinds of things, this reawakening of this idea of actually the oppression can come from the opposite side, but then of like the traditional sexual ethic being part of colonialism in that way. So it's very interesting to see how in the different cultures the conversation around LGBT people and colonialism gets very enmeshed in different ways.
Yes. Yes. And especially I would say in Asia, like, it's not even just like aspects of like cultural colonialism, I guess would be a way to put it. It's anything coming from the West is seen as harmful, negative, because I don't know, it almost feels like it's such a dichotomy between the two because they're so vastly different in a lot of ways. And a big point that is focused on is preserving traditional like Asian values, which a lot of that is tied up in religion and like local traditions and practices. And that's one of the big reasons why Christianity is such an outlawed religion, because it's seen as the white man's religion. And currently a majority of the top 50 most dangerous nations to be a Christian are located in East Asia, parts of the Middle East, and then Africa. Those are the top 3 regions where it's the most dangerous to be a Christian, because all of that's tied up in colonialism, Christianity being seen as a white man's religion, and then anything like tied around that, even if it's not even like Christian, if it's coming from the West, they don't want it. They don't want to talk about it. They're gonna put things like on the global news that makes them look like they're, I guess, I don't know, improving or doing things to be seen as like progressive on a global scale. But then internally, it's just the same old that they've been doing, if not going the opposite direction of like reinforcing stereotypes that the media is putting out in regards to anything Western.
We could sit here and talk about this forever, but I know we're kind of getting on the longer side of stuff. So I want us to move into talking about, there are definitely people here listening. I mean, obviously they voted for this topic, for us to talk about this topic. So there are definitely people planning to go into missions. Side B people planning to get into this, who might already be in missions, trying to figure out how to have these conversations with their organization, how to navigate being in their culture. What are some things that have stood out from y'all's experiences, even Jesse, as you've been going through this process of preparing to like go about it, like what are some things that have stood out? Because I've talked with people that have even gone, is it even possible to be like gay in a missions context, like between isolation, between dealing with different culture, between dealing with a homophobic organization. Like there's so many factors that can stand in the way. Yeah, what are y'all's thoughts? Keifer, you want to start us off again?
Sure. At least to me, the most important thing has always been being really upfront. And even when that's backfired, that there have been times that backfired, but being able to say, here's where I'm at, and I'm just going to tell you ahead of time. Like, I don't want to get into a situation where it's going to have to be brought up later on. Like, here's, where I'm at, here's probably where I'm going, etc. And then secondly, I think the most important thing is choosing to be vulnerable rather than doing fight or flight.
Yeah.
So when someone asks a question that is either offensive or hard to answer, or you're just like, okay, like understanding, okay, this person might not be coming from a context where they even know how to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let myself be vulnerable here. And when you let yourself be vulnerable, you are saying, like, you can hurt me. You're leaving yourself open to hurt. But at the same time, choosing fight or flight almost always burns bridges.
Yeah.
And so those two things together, but then also knowing when it's time to say, like, this is an unhealthy, like, this is actually not going to be a productive or healthy relationship. I don't have to be, like, I can love everyone in my organization. I love fellow believers, but I don't have to be, like, working closely with this person.
Yeah.
Who I don't necessarily jive with.
Yeah. I think that's really important, and like that's why I have mad respect for you, the way you approach with the organization. Like, I'm gonna say the most abrasive way, that way, because we can many times go the opposite way of going, I'm gonna make this as palatable as possible, and then we'll
definitely
just
a temptation.
It is.
Being liked has always
I think
been...
it also depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
not necessarily make it as palatable as possible, but communicate what you need to say in a way that's not going to be such, this is going to sound bad, but like an assault on the way they see the world or their understanding of the terms you're going to use. Because if it's that much of a shock to their system, you might not get where you want to go.
Yeah.
So depending on the situation, you're going to know them as like, if going this abrasive route is going to be the best for me, that means I'm going to be able to get a clear answer from them without there being a bad situation for me or a dangerous situation, for example.
And being abrasive in a vulnerable way.
Do that.
Yeah. Like not being abrasive in a way that's like, hey, like you're the problem. Like, hey, I'm going to...
Oh, no, definitely not. Never do that.
Openly say, this is where I am at. This is about me.
Yes.
This is what I want you to know about me. It's not about... Your reaction does not come into bearing here. But I want you to know this.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. I think another thing that stood out to me that I was just thinking about is I've talked to a few people. Like, it's one thing if you already find yourself on the mission field, and that, like, we've talked a lot about the fact that it is okay to be processing what are your beliefs on sexual ethics. That is a process. There is no timeline on figuring out beliefs. There's also no timeline on figuring out your identity. Like, these are things that people need to take time. And many times you might start that process while on the mission field.
The mission field.
But I have talked to a few people who are like, I don't know what I believe on sexual ethics. I don't know what I believe about being in a relationship. I'm going to go into missions and then figure it out. And I'm always with those people go, don't do that. Don't do that. And
like if you're going into that with that mentality, like, I'll figure it out on the way. It's like, okay, you do that.
You're in for a wild ride. Let me tell you.
Then I don't think you know what you're getting.
Well, because if you're also not sure if you want to be in a gay relationship, you might be going to a country where that's not going to be possible, or that
exactly.
There, you also might not be with a good organization in that, and you might not have support to figure it out. And then the other thing is it's not like a job where you're sitting in your same state, or your homeland. Like, you're moving your life, and if you end up coming to a different conclusion, you're moving back all over again. Like, that's a lot. So I've encouraged people. I'm like, I'm all for, like, there's no rush on if you have doubts, if you have things you're working through, take the time. But maybe do that not on the mission field if you can help it, because there's already enough stuff working against you that it's okay to take that time here.
And that's actually a big reason why I am not on the field yet. That's not the only reason. Another big reason is I want to do counseling as missions, and so I have to get my licensure first before I go on the field.
Right.
But I think in tandem with that, a thing that I wasn't prepared for until it started happening is I didn't realize how much I was going to actually need to be working through my sexuality and some of my own like beliefs and even just ways of talking about it until I started working through that process. And then I was like, wow, I'm really glad I'm not having to do this on the field because it's so easy to do that here in a space that is safe, where I can build good community and good support prior to me leaving. And also just knowing that, like, again, it's not a rush. Like, I can still be doing missions work here as much as I can on the field overseas.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And so, like, I'm really grateful that the Lord has really like slowed and halted some of that process for me, because it's given me the chance to work through a lot of those questions and doubts and misunderstandings here in the States, where it doesn't really impact my life in a significant way where it would if I was doing that in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And I think another part of the process thing is too that people need to go through, because like we said, you're going across cultural missions. You don't know what your context is going to be there, because you may very well have to be closeted to a certain extent in that country. It's important to like realize like how out do I need to be? What does that mean for me to even be out? Are we talking about the way I talk about things? Are we talking about the way I present myself? And are we talking about the way I dress? Like, how important are those things to me? And can I put that stuff on the back burner for what I feel that I'm called to do? Am I willing to play the part over there? And if that's the case, that's like, yeah, I can do that. You definitely still need to, I feel, you need in your missions organization have people that know where you are, though. So it's like outside of the house, or like in the street, or out there. I have to be this thing to an extent, a certain amount of fake. I need some people that I can still be real with here on the inside of my organization, that are my community, that are my support system. And so kind of depending on your context is going to depend on what that looks like. And you, like I said, figuring that out on the field is a lot.
Yeah.
And I think conversely with that, like the people who are going as missionaries who are gay, like their story, like if you're in a country where you can share your story, obviously your stories matter. I would not have been able to get to where I'm at without other missionaries who were on the field, who actually we were able to talk through our mutual stories. Of like, oh, we're both actually, at the time, I was using same-sex attracted. We're both same-sex attracted. How did, we got connected somehow. And I haven't shared with that many people, but let's, like your stories matter to the broader culture. Every culture needs forerunners who will be ahead, in the front.
Yeah.
Even honor shame cultures, like being able to say, hey, like this is who I am. I'm not ashamed. I've been accepted into the body of Christ, and I know I'm part of the family of God. And like that's the gospel for an honor shame culture. Is I'm part of God's family. I don't have to be influenced by this anymore. And that's crazy to an honor shame culture. And there's an appropriate way to bring that up. So don't just like, flaunt everything, because you'll probably get killed or something. But like, at the same time, there is an appropriate time to share your story, and trust the Lord for that. Yeah,
Absolutely. That one. Yeah. I think that's just so, it's just, it takes intentionality, I think, in so much. It takes being.
It does.
It takes being, because I feel like with cross-cultural missions, you're declaring a new home. Like, you're attaching part of yourself to a new culture. Like, I know that was a sad part for me coming back to the States, because I love Colombia, but I realized just it was not sustainable for me long term.
There's a strategic component of like, let me think through what I'm going to do and make my actions actually count for something.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to our last question, anything else that stands out there on things you think would be important?
I think I want to say something that I've always thought is important, even as like when I first started thinking about like processing my sexuality. Like I said, I did do it on the field, and it was a whole process. I did it a lot. It's like you guys taught me how to study and investigate and interpret the word, and that's what I'm gonna do, and that's what I did. But I feel like if only missions organizations understood what a valuable asset
Absolutely.
Side B community can be. Because what does Paul say? That when you're married, you have to give this extra effort to your spouse, to your children,
Yes.
to all these things. But when you are single, you have so much extra to give to the Lord, in a sense. And a lot of missions organizations, at the very least the ones I saw in South America, I don't know how the rest are around the world, they really like to be like, oh, so family-centered and everything.
Yeah.
But the way YWAM works is a lot of people, we all live together in like either the same base or the same house. And it's very community-based, and I loved that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And I feel like that's something that would be important and life-giving to a celibate side B person. To be able to live in a home with lots of other people that's mixed within single people and married couples and children, and be in this family environment when they feel called to, singleness because of this, that, or the other thing. That it's like you as a person are such an asset to the mission field, and the mission field can even be life-giving and an asset for you as a person. That it's such this great collaboration that I think that the mission field is missing out on because they can't see the forest for the trees. That they're always worried about how this is going to be maybe harmful for their organization to have someone like this, that they don't realize how much of an asset this person really could be for them. And I wish missions organizations knew that. And I hope that everyone who's listening to this and thinking about missions, I hope you do know that you are valuable
Yes.
as someone who can work in, be it local missions, foreign missions, wherever you want to be, because you as a person have so much to give.
You're an important part of the family of God.
Yes.
Yes.
You're needed.
You're not just something
Yes.
to be tolerated, like which some
Yes.
organizations can make it out to be. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yes.
I was also going to say on the other side of things, like when you're preparing to go on mission, like we need community on the field, but we also need a community of support in the States too, or in your country of origin, wherever you're going from. And one of the most life-giving things that I've been able to experience as I've been preparing is I've had a plethora of people that I've encountered at my school, through my new church, in my work environment, even of non-Christians, where I've shared with them like what the Lord's put on my heart and what I feel called to do. And I have so many people who have said, I want to, in some way, shape, or form, support you and be with you in this journey, in this process. And a lot of that kind of goes back to like my decision, especially as I got more comfortable with myself and with my story and my sexuality, of just being unapologetic about who I am and saying like, this is who I am, take it or leave it, and doing that in a way that was not being like defensively abrasive, but doing it in a way where I really wanted to show people like this is what it looks like to be a side B Christian, and a side B Christian who wants to do missions and is passionate about setting aside even some of my own comforts that I could have as a side B individual for the sake of missions. And that's been such a life-giving experience. And I know that like even in my moments when I'm on the field where I am almost certainly going to experience loneliness and difficulty and heartbreak and intense hardship, I have a God who loves and cares about me and values me as his child. And I have a community of support in the States and in my organization that loves me and values me as one of their own.
That's great. All right. Well, we could keep talking again about this for hours. We will close out by asking the one question that we're asking everyone to finish off this season. So, Keifer and Jesse, if you could send a message to your younger self, you pick the age, what message would it be? And also, what age would you pick? Like, what age would you send yourself to, if you have a specific age?
Okay, I guess I'd go back to 15 probably. That was when things were really culminating in a hard way for me, and just to say like, it's worth it to keep following Jesus, to keep going after Jesus, to keep giving him everything. The thing that really helped me later on was realizing I really can't hold anything back. So if I could tell myself, like, don't hold anything back from Jesus and just go after him with everything, like that would be my biggest message to myself.
Awesome. Jesse?
Okay, so for me, it was when I was 12. That to this date is the hardest year I've experienced in my life. It was also a culmination of a lot of stuff. My dad was on deployment to Afghanistan. I was working through sexuality and gender stuff, community and familial stress that was happening. I met my abuser that year as well. And it was really rough. And I think the message that I would say to myself at that point is, you are about to be in the midst of the hardest year of your life. And, gosh, sorry. And you're not going to know what to do, and you're not going to have anyone. It's going to feel like you have no one around who wants to help you or care for you. But the Lord is there with you. He is sitting with you in that pain. He is with you every step of the way, and he will keep you grounded in your faith. And you will have community and love and support like you've never known at the end of that. So that's what I would say.
Thanks for sharing that, both of you. Thanks for taking this time, quite a bit of time. This is a longer running episode than we normally do, but I've enjoyed it. It's been great. Yeah, I hope this is helpful to everyone listening. If you're considering going into missions, if you are in missions, we would love to hear from you, like what your experience was. If you are a patron, share with us in the Discord server. We'd love to hear. Talk to us on Twitter. You can send us a message. Love to hear about your thoughts as you're processing going into missions, or whether you are already in missions. Thanks.
Or hey, even send this if like you have an organization that's like open to hearing things. Send this to them. Be like, hey, this is what it's like.
Exactly.
Listen to them.
Yes. Thank you.
It might be eye opening for some of the straight board directors.
Because I promise you, in every missions organization, we are there.
Oh yeah, we're there, buddy. We're there.
We are there. It's just a matter of whether we feel comfortable telling you.
Yeah, that's totally it.
Keifer, Jesse, thank you so much for joining us, y'all. This was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
This has been one, Ashley, you and I have talked a bit about for a while doing.
For a while, yeah.
So we finally got it on here. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.